Dr. Gary Sprouse, welcome to Podcastina.
Elena, thank you so much for having me on. And let's get somebody in their happy place and be less stressed.
I love that goal so much. I think a good place to start again is, what is your working definition of stress and what that feels like in the body?
Yeah. So I use this very broad definition of stress. So to me, stress is us trying to adapt to our environment that keeps changing with our body that keeps changing. So there's always going to be stress in our life because the environment's always changing and we're always changing. So the only time stress stops is when you die. So I'm trying to get people to have less stress before they die.
That's a great goal.
Yeah.
Can I ask you how you got into this work? Like, what sparked your passion with working with stress?
Yeah. So as a physician, right, I'm a primary care doctor and I retired a couple years ago. But while I was practicing, I would see patients with their high blood pressure, diabetes, their insomnia, with their anxiety stuff. And what I was realizing is their stresses were contributing to their physical problems. And so when you look at stress and what it does to you physically, there's a book that I use as a reference, and it was called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a great title, right? But the guy has spends 300 pages telling you all the things that stress does to your body. It increases your cortisol and your adrenaline and all this kind of stuff. But here's the analogy that I use. Like your car can go 120 miles an hour for a while. But then if you keep driving at 120, it's going to start breaking down. And that's exactly what happens to the human body. The human body was meant to handle some stress, but when you run it at 120 miles an hour, it's going to start breaking down. And that's what I saw. And so then I was like, well, I can send people to a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever. But I read the study that said that when I send somebody, 75% of the time, they're not going to go. So I'm like, well, okay, well, then that's kind of dumb. If I'm sending you to a psychologist and there's a 75% chance you're not going to get there, well, then I'm kind of wasting your time and my time. So how about I figured out how to do some of this and then sort of I incorporated what I'm doing with the psychological stuff with the physical stuff. And then someone said, you're a holistic doctor. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I am, right? Yeah.
Is it not good to be a holistic doctor?
I don't know, right? It just felt weird. Here, I'll tell you the story, right? So for Halloween, I like to get dressed up. It's one of my favorite holidays of the year, right? So one year I was dressed up as Pitbull, the singer. And I said, all right, I'm going to shave my head. And my wife's like, what? And I'm like, and I called my sister as a hairdresser. Like, it's going to grow back, right? She's, yeah. So I shaved my head, right? And I'm like, so then my wife's like, oh, really like that. So I'm like, so then I decided, all right, I want to keep it shaved. So like the next week, someone was talking to somebody on the side and they're like, yeah, my doctor's the bald doctor. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me, right? Yeah. So sometimes I'm surprised by the titles because when you're not used to it, you're like, wait, what? Yeah. So.
Is there a scientific way to measure stress? Is it just like cortisol levels?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do all that, but it doesn't really correlate very well. Cortisol levels fluctuate all the time, so they're not very predictive of what's going to happen. Excuse me. Same thing with adrenaline. So I would say that no, there's not a real good way to measure it. I mean, we look at blood pressure and pulses and things like that, but again, they're fluctuating all the time. And stress is a part of our life. It's not, it's not something that you're going to run away from. In fact, one of the things I say to people is give up the idea that you're going to be in some stress-free situation because it does two things. First off, it wastes your energy thinking that maybe someday I'll be able to have stress-free. And two, it makes you feel bad that you aren't. So if you're trying really hard and you're not stress-free, you're like, oh, I'm failing. Well, like, no. So I tell people, stop wasting your energy on trying to be stress-free. And really what you need to do is learn how to manage your stress better. But to do that, you have to know where your stress is coming from. And that's where I come in.
And if someone doesn't even realize they're in this state of chronic stress, like how do we self-identify that it's at a point where it needs to be treated?
Well, I came up with this term and I call it stress blindness. And stress blindness is, the medical term is habituation, but the bottom line is you have this certain level of stress that you're used to. And so you just go, okay, that's normal. And then anything that blips up above that, you're like, oh, now I'm really stressed. But no, so I had to do this myself. When I was in school, I would commute from Virginia to Washington D.C. And on when there's in the middle of the night, if I had to go back to the hospital, it would be a 15-minute drive. But during the day, it was an hour drive. And if there was any kind of like traffic accident or bad weather, then it was 2 hours. But that was just normal, right? You didn't even think about it. So when I moved to the Eastern Shore, which is a lot more rural, and I go back into traffic now, I feel my everything tenses up and my heart rate goes up and I start and I'm like, oh, I was probably doing this when I was a student, but didn't even realize it because it was part of that baseline of what my stress was. So part of it is just figuring out like, what is it that I'm doing that's causing problems? It's not always easy to tell because again, stress is a part of our life. So it's really more like, let's figure out what the ingredients are that go into causing stresses, and then we can do something about those.
That example really resonates with me because I've been living in LA and I know that I'm like, I kind of joke it's Stockholm syndrome where I'm like, oh, you get used to the traffic. But I think my body suffers in the long term.
No, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, and I've been. What is it? Well, there's a Route 5 and is it a 405 or is
The
that what?
405, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I was driving from north of LA to south of LA at like 12 o'clock at night, and there was still traffic, and I'm like, what the heck? What are you people doing? Go to bed, right?
It's so true. And can you elaborate a little bit more on stress blindness? Like, is it pretty common? Do you see it a lot? Do you have to like
No, I think we
focus
all
down?
have it. No, I think
Yeah.
we all have it. Like, because, but one of the things that I'm seeing is that over the last, well, since I've been a doctor from the time, so that was 38 years ago, right? So I've been a doctor 38, 40 years. I think in the last 40 years, the baseline of stress for people has gone up despite I mean, we live in this amazing world, right? Like there's never been the luxuries that we have. My wife and I went to Germany on a vacation and we're in this beautiful castle. And it's like, God, this is amazing, right? Like 20-foot ceilings, beautiful artwork. I mean, giant rooms and there's 50 bedrooms, right? And we're like, wait, but they don't have heating. They don't have air conditioning. They didn't have a telephone. They don't have elevators. It's a 5-story building. I'm like, wait, what? They didn't even have indoor toilets. I'm like, oh no, right? So we live in this incredibly luxurious world, and yet our stresses have been gone up. And you're like, so why is that? Well, I think there's a couple reasons. So as part of it, so social media is this incredibly powerful tool, but it has some side effects to it. So one of the things that I see is we're a very visual organism. So when we see something, that's way more impactful than we hear about it or read about it. So 40 years ago, you'd read the newspaper about the Vietnam War or whatever it was, right? And you would read about a soldier dying or some villager, the place getting blown up or something. But now we're like watching TV and a bomb's gone off and watch a kid get his arm blown off in front of our eyes, like real time. And you're like, whoa. So it's way more impactful. And second is before it was like, I could worry about what I could think of. But now, like literally anybody in the world can post anything anywhere in the world of all the dangerous things that could possibly happen to things that I never even envisioned happening, right? So it's like somebody's nanny does something. You're like, what? I never even thought about that. Oh my God, right? Yeah. So it's like, so for those two reasons alone, our stresses have gone up, 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 up. And then I think there's also this whole, we talk about the political stuff in our world, and I'm like, that's always been around. In fact, it's less than it used to be. When I was reading this book the book was 10 things that every smart person should know about the trends of the world. One of the trends was like the amount of wars that we have in our world now are so much less than it used to be. So when I was in Germany, like they literally didn't ever not be in war. Like they were always fighting between the different states and the different countries. I mean, literally there was always a war going on. Now there's a couple wars going on, but they're pretty minimal compared to 8 billion people in the world. So we live in this much more coordinated world, but that also bonks us up against things. So like in the past, like geographically, if you were a Christian, you didn't really bonk up against many Buddhists or Hindus because geography kept you apart. But now there's the geography is so minimal. Now you're bonking up. And so what you see is every religion has their own rights and wrongs, but they're not always the same. And so now you start ended up having all these like, I don't think you guys are doing it right. You're treating women wrong, or you're treating women crazy. Right? And so now you have all these disagreements over right and wrong because in the past it would have never happened.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you highlight social media because I know that sometimes our eyes can't make the distinction whether it's on the screen or happening in front of us.
Well, most of the time it is happening, right? And yeah, well, and I give you right because that's what our eyes are set up to do, right? So our part of our eyesight was to set up to find dangerous things. So when somebody throws a YouTube out there, it's like some person doing something dangerous. You're going, oh yeah, I got to avoid that because here's what I see. So humans have been set up to find dangerous things in our environment. We're also set up to find good things in our environment, like food and other humans. But what happens is if I'm in a room and there's 10 people trying to give me $1,000, but there's one guy in the corner with a machine gun, guess who I'm paying attention to, right? Right, the guy with the machine gun. Cause if I'm dead, then all the other $10,000 doesn't do me any good at all. So we're actually programmed to look for the dangerous things in our environment. And guess what our media does? Oh yeah, they give us all the dangerous things we can think of because so here's what we say. Like, I want to hear about, some 100-year-old guy's birthday, but I need to watch that video about the, gunman in Australia because that might change whether I stay alive or not. So the media then buys into that. And now our media isn't just a half an hour TV show on the evening. It's now 24/7. So we're inundated with all these images, which leads to our baseline of stress going up, 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 up.
That definitely intuitively makes sense. And I know anecdotally people will be like, oh, I left my phone at home today and I went into the woods, and you just feel so much better.
Yes. Well, yeah, because, for two reasons. One, you're not getting inundated with this difficult stuff to even process. But two, being around nature and being around other living things and being quiet, like, yeah, it lowers, all the chemical things you're talking about, they all get lowered down. And yes, you definitely feel better.
Is there a difference between how men experience stress versus women?
Oh my God. Yes. I
I
hate to
love
be
these
sexist, but
questions.
yes, it's crazy different, right? So I've done seminars where there's men and women in the room. And I go around the room, I go, okay, write down something that you feel guilty about. And women are writing furiously, right? And the men are going, they're looking at the ceiling, like, right? It's like, wait, what? If I say, like, tell me things that you worry about, women are, and men are like, yeah, I don't worry, right? But I will say this. One of the things that I had to learn was I was at a Tony Robbins conference, and he said there was 9,000 people at this conference, right? And half women, half men. And he goes, okay, women, how many times have you felt afraid in the last month? And I think every woman raised their hand. And they said, all right, man, how many of you have felt afraid in the last month? And I'm, two or three. And I'm like, oh, that was a stark difference, right? I mean, what? Like, it was dramatic how different it was. So yeah, women and men approach stress differently, handle stress differently, feel stress differently. Yes, a lot.
Are women biologically like more predisposed to things like worry and fear?
So, and again, I'm generalizing here, right? Because there's plenty of men that are like this, and plenty of women that aren't. But in general, women, when they feel stressed out, they tend to share. So they tend to go, oh, they're talking. Like my wife goes to a book club, and they spend 25% of the time talking about the book, and then the other 75% of the time they talk about the other stuff that's bugging them, right? And so by sharing, it then reduces their stresses because they feel like they have friends in the world and they get to take in advice, whatever. Men tend to be minimizers. So they tend to go, well, whatever, that's so small, I don't even have to pay attention to it, right? And I find that those two strategies attract each other in the beginning. So women are getting, they're stressed out and they're feeling stressed, and their spouse goes, oh, it's okay. Everything's going to be all right. And it is the first time. And they go, oh, that makes me feel so good. And the husband gets to feel, oh, it makes me feel good that I made you feel good, right? But then once in a while, the husband's not right, and whatever the wife was worried about does go wrong. And even though the husband's like, no, no, it's going to be okay. And she's like, that's what you said the last time. And it didn't go okay. So no, I'm not. All right. So then what they then do is so the husband's like, wait, it used to work. So I'm going to keep doing it. And then not only does it not work anymore, but now it actually makes the wife mad because she's like, well, why am I having to do all the worry when you just sit around drinking beer, watching, sports and denying that there's anything that could go wrong. So that dynamic, I can see why people get attracted, but I can also see where it leads to people not being attracted to each other. So when I was talking about the gunman and the money, so here's the problem. So every other organism in the world wants to do the same thing we do, which is keep our environment safe. The problem that humans have gotten into is our environment includes the future because we're so good at looking at the future that it's literally a part of our environment. So when you go, I'm going to look for any dangerous things that could happen in my environment. That doesn't just mean like in your studio in LA and in my bedroom in Maryland. It also means the whole earth. It also means the whole universe. Oh, and it all means all the future too. That's quite an environment to try and keep safe. And that's where people get into trouble. And so women tend to do that more than men because men are going, yeah, it's not going to happen. Whereas women are going, no, no, that could be bad. And here's what I think. This I go back to like caveman days. So in caveman days, women were more set up to watch kids. And so to watch kids, you can't minimize. You're like, oh no, they might see that rock and eat it, or they might think that stick is they might think that snake is a stick and play with it. Like, no, no. So they tend to be more forward thinking and looking for dangers in the future. So that's where worry comes in. Whereas guys are like, no, I got to go kill a woolly mammoth. So I don't want to think about all the bad things that can happen. So they just tend to minimize, like, yeah, I can do it, right? So that's where I think that's where one of the big differences between men and women are.
I think the men might be onto something because I read somewhere that like most autoimmune disease impacts women, and that's
It
like very
does,
stress
right?
related.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's what I've read that same thing, and it does. I don't know if it's all about worry, but definitely worry is playing some role in it. And so, what I talk to people about is, worry isn't by itself isn't a bad thing. It's again, same thing. Like you can drive your car at 60 and it's going to go pretty far. But if you drive your car at 120, that's where you get into trouble. So a little worry is okay. It's when you do too much that people get into problems. And what I find is, I'd have patients come to me and say, Dr. Sprouse, I worry that I worry too much. And I'm like, well, then, yeah, you probably do, right? But I said to them, like, tell me what worry is. And they're like, well, it's worry. And you're like, yeah, that doesn't work, right? So I came up with this more objective criteria for what worry is. So it's being able to envision the future, which is this incredible skill that we have. Yay, right? But then focusing on all the bad things that can happen. And then here's the third part, which actually makes it bad, is then having a fear reaction right now to something that actually hasn't happened yet, right? So you're really having a fear reaction to a thought or an idea or a what if is what I write it down as, right? So now you're having fear reactions to what ifs. So all you got to do is think about, oh, what would happen if this? And you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden your body's reacting as if it happened. And you're like, yeah, no. So then you're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning going, where, or like, I forgot I was supposed to worry about that. Right. So now you start driving yourself crazy because you're just worried about everything. And when someone comes along and says, no, that's not going to happen, you're like, no, right. So, and here's what I found is that women think that worrying shows they care.
Mm.
So by worrying, they feel like they're putting energy into the system and going, I care about you because I worry about you. And I have to say, well, stop, back up a second. See, so worry, having a fear reaction to somebody else might have having something wrong. That doesn't help at all. So and I see this with my wife and I, because it'll get us into trouble. Like she's worried about her son doing something and she's like crying and not sleeping. I'm like, honey, that is not helping at all. In fact, it actually makes it worse because when you're running around in fear, when fear is the primary emotion running around, it literally turns your thinking part of your brain off. So you're actually less likely to be able to solve the problem. I go, solving the problem is what's going to make him feel better, not worrying about it. But what I see is most women kind of get that idea that worrying is their way of showing that they care. And so they're not really interested in not worrying. They just want to, what they don't want to do is get overwhelmed. And so when you worry a lot, that leads you to getting overwhelmed.
I really like that you pointed out that it, for women at least, it is kind of this marker of, I care, I'm trying to help.
Yes.
So once we can untangle that, what are the steps to like put the worry down and still feel okay about it?
Yeah. So, okay. So first off, stop thinking that worry by itself is what shows you care. Really what people are looking for is some way to solve whatever problem they have. So really what you need to do is reduce your fear so you can think more, and that what you want to do is really help solve their problem. And that's the key, right? So solving their problem. So to worry less, there's two things that I talk about. One is called realistic optimism. So realistic optimism says, hey, instead of focusing on all the bad things, I'm going to focus on the good things that could happen, which then makes me feel good right now, right? So it does the same thing. If I focus on bad, I feel bad. If I focus on good, I feel good. So I'm going to focus on good things, but I'm not going to ignore that bad things could happen, because that's where men get into trouble. They get to the point of denial. They go, no, it can't happen. Yeah, that's where they get into trouble. So saying they can happen, but they're just unlikely. I'm going to focus on good things happening, then makes you feel good right now. But how do you be realistic? So realism is a second tool that I use called the worry organizer. So the worry organizer says, wait, what is it that I'm worried about? So it's like this sheet that you write down, and there's 5 categories. And I find that writing it down actually helps, because it focuses your thinking, it organizes what you're thinking, and it gives you this record that you can then go back to or show to other people, right? So it goes like, what are you worried about? So, like a kid might be worried about going to college. And you're like, well, why are you worried about that? Well, like, my mom went to college, but my dad didn't. And I don't know if I'm smart enough, and I've had some problems in school, blah, blah, blah. All right. Okay. Now I understand what you're worried about and why you're worried about. So how likely is it that you're not going to go to college? So instead of just thinking about it, let's put numbers to it, because the numbers actually help out, right? So if you go, well, the chance of me getting into college are, I don't know, 30%. And you're like, well, what would happen if you didn't go? How bad would it be if you didn't go to college? Well, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be that bad. Maybe, I would be able to go do a job that my dad does because he didn't go to college. And you're like, yeah, okay. So then you're going, well, what can you do to make sure you get to college? Because that's what you want, right? And so now you come up with this whole to-do list of like, well, I can do extra projects. I can join a club. I can do this. I can go visit colleges. I can get my mom to like talk to her friends. So I get, or I can go to community college for a couple of years and try it, blah, blah, blah. So you come up with a whole list. And then the last one would be like, well, what would happen if you didn't go to college? What would you do? And then you can start planning for the future, but without fear, because now you're just doing this on your own, right? Because now the fear part is taken away, because you're not going, oh, right? Because you're going, the chances of you not getting in college are pretty small, actually, when you look at it. Because if I go to community college, who doesn't get to go to community, right? It's like, so the chances are really small. You're not going to go. And even if you didn't, it wasn't that bad a thing. So like now you can start planning, well, what would I do if I didn't get into college, blah, 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 right? So when you put all those together, now you got the sheet. Then you can show it to your counselor. You can show it to your parents. You can show it to your friends. You can show it to whoever, right? And they can go, oh, no, you forgot to add this. Or, don't do that. Those numbers aren't right. So I had a lady who was worried about breast cancer, and she had 100% chance she was going to get it, and 100% she was going to die from it because her mom and sister had it. And I'm like, no, the numbers are 15% you're likely, and 85% you're going to survive. And you're like, it changed her world, right? So when you fill out that form, now you can go, I don't have to worry. I don't have to have fear, because I've already looked into the future. I paid attention to what bad was happening, but I'm focused on, I'm going to get into college and everything's going to be great. But I've planned just in case it doesn't work out, right?
You actually specifically answered a question that I had teed up, which was, how do we practice this, this like realistic
Yeah.
optimism without trudging into denial territory?
There you go. Yep. Nope. Yeah. So this my fun one, as I talk about, like your kid comes to you and says, hey, he's 16 years old and he wants to go to a concert. And you're like, oh, that makes me a little nervous. You're kind of young. Crazy things can happen, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, all right, you've been a good kid. All right, fine. You can go. And he goes, oh yeah, by the way, Dad, it's in another state. And you're like, wait, what? right? You start freaking out because what did that do? It didn't really change anything except when you go, well, how likely is it to happen? And how dangerous is it? Well, it didn't really change a whole lot about how likely it is to happen, but it changed a whole lot about, well, how bad would it be if it did happen? Because now you're in a whole nother state. You're, hundreds of miles away. I don't know anybody there, blah, 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 right? So the numbers changed. So then your answer changed. And so what normally happens is you go, here's what happened without the worry organizer. You go, wait, no, you cannot go to a concert in another state. And your son's like, why? It's not any worse than being in this state. It's not that big a deal. Yes, it is, because rah, rah. And you're like, you're a crappy dad. You're like holding me back. And you're like, you're a snotty-nosed kid, right? So you start arguing with each other and calling each other names as opposed to going, no, I think it's a 15% chance likelihood that this is going to be right. Or a 20, like you start talking numbers and then you're like, oh, well, now we don't have to, now we're fighting about numbers, not about each other. And you can do research. So I can call the police up in that state and go, hey, how likely is it for a kid to get in trouble at a concert? And what would I do if he did get, right? So now you can start doing all this without having all those negative emotions going on.
So is it fair to say the implementation stage of curbing all the anxiety and fear is to do research and kind of like pull statistics?
That's part of it. Yeah. Well, plus you get to talk to, I mean, and your research could include talking to other people who've been, this is where the strength of social media comes in. Like I wanted to buy something the other day and I went in and I said, hey, has anybody bought this thing? And then I got like 250 responses going, yeah, don't even get close to buying it. It's stupid. Right. So then you're like, oh, how powerful is that? So just by typing in one thing, you find the answer the other day. You don't end up wasting your money and your time because you've used other people's resources. Because there's a lot of people in the world that you can use their, like you're not the first person that's had this problem, right? And so it's like, yeah, being able to use other people's experience is really beneficial to yourself.
I love that a lot. Can you talk to me about how we would implement realistic optimism when it comes to stresses that are in our interpersonal relationships?
Well, okay. So most people when they go into a relationship are tend to be realistic optimists. Can you think about this? When we get married, we're standing in front of a bunch of people and say, hey, I'm going to live with you for the rest of my life, no matter what. That's crazy optimism, right? Not always so realistic, but it's crazy optimism. That's what we want in our relationships, right? We want to feel like this is going to go on forever and ever, no matter how sick you get, no how broken you get, no matter whatever's going on, I'm going to be with you forever, right? And I'm saying this a bunch in front of people. So that is by definition optimism, right? So the realism comes into where you have to say, wait, it's possible that things might not go right. Like we might end up in some troubles here and there. So we're going to be proactive. So we're going to figure out a way to communicate ahead of time. We're going to be, because what I see is most people when their relationships end, it ends because communication has broken down and somebody's saying A, but the other person's hearing B and they're saying C and the other person's hearing D. And they're not on. So I was at this conference once where this couple brought up this thing called it's called mirroring. I don't know if you've heard of this or not. Mm-hmm. So mirroring is you say something and the other person is going to repeat back what you said. So they heard what you said, right? And you can correct whatever, right? So the lady goes, well, I don't like it that your money comes in from your work intermittently. And he goes, what? I work really hard. I don't know why you would say that. Right? And she's like, wait, and she's like, you never listen to me. So now they're like, shh, and they just ramped right up to a giant fight, right? So the moderator's like, whoa, stop, sure, right? So she's like, let's try this again. So the lady goes, look, I don't like that your money comes intermittently because when I'm paying the bills, one month we get a lot of money, and the next month we don't have any money, so it makes it hard to pay the bills. And the husband goes, well, I don't like that either. And I'm like, wait, what? So they had agreed, but they ended up in a big giant fight, not because they didn't agree, but because they had miscommunicated, right? So communication is critical to relationships to do that. The second issue that I see is, so the realism part would be, let's figure out a way to communicate before we get into trouble, right? And the second thing that I see that gets couples into trouble is, like, I was making this list the other day, and I was like, I used to say 5, but it's more like 8 or 9 or 10, right? So you have to match up with this person on a whole bunch of different places. So you have to want to eat kind of the same things. You want to, you know, you want to be at least tolerant of each other's religion. You have to figure out how much sex you want to have. You want to figure out how you're going to raise kids. You got to figure out how you're going to spend your money, right? All these different places. You want to have to be able to trust each other. You want to be honest with each other, communicate, right? So there's all these places that you have to match up with. With your friends, it isn't like that. So I have friends that I don't care what religion are, because as long as they can play basketball and make a basket, then they're good, right? I don't care what their religion or political affiliation is. I don't care. My wife, I care, right? So what happens though is you start messing up in one area and it starts leaking into the other areas. And that's where people get into trouble. So when my wife and I got married, we've been married like 13 years now, because it was our second marriage for both of us. We took this test ahead of time and we matched up 9 out of 10. We were like 100%, 9 out of 10. The guy was like, what? I've never seen this before. But the 10th one was money. And the way we handle money, way different, right? And that was a potential problem for our relationship. So it was a place that we used our realistic optimism. Look, I want to be with you the rest of my life. So we need to be realistic and figure out how we're going to do money. And so I compromised some, she compromised some. And now we're she calls me the gas pedal and she's the brake, but it's like, it works out, right? So between the two of us, we actually make a pretty functional pair, right? So it's like, I'm ready to go invest in some crazy thing. And she's like, no. And she's like, I don't want to spend any money. I'm like, no, we need, right? So we've kind of gotten to the middle where we're now pretty close to each other. So it worked out much better.
I love that because it kind of puts it into an area where you can measure it, right? Like you can do these compatibility tests and
Yeah.
then get ahead of what might turn out to be
Wow.
an issue down the line.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. There you go.
What are some like small daily habits people can implement to get better at like pushing stress away or maybe just minimizing it in the first place?
So here's the easiest one that I talk about, and probably the most powerful one, right? I tell people this, you'll like the story. I'm doing this lecture, right? And it's 15-minute lecture. And I go, I'm going to tell you one line that's going to get rid of half your stress. But you're going to have to wait for it because I have to put like some groundwork, right? So I get about halfway through and I go, okay, now here it is. Here's the line. And just as I'm getting ready to deliver it, my mic goes out. And I'm like, wait, it wasn't planned, by the way. But I have thought about planning it now. And be like, oh, my mic went out. Now you're going to have to wait some more, right? Anyway, so here I got my mic back on. It took 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, all right. So I felt like I was a stand-up comedian at the time because I started talking some jokes, right? I was like, good, right. So now I'm trying to invade your space, right? Anyway, so here's the line, right? So your stresses max out at a 10. Everybody else's stresses max out at a 5. And half your stress will go away. Because what I see, and this is a particular problem for women, is they suck in everybody else's stresses as if it's theirs. And that gets them into trouble. So when I was a young whippersnapper doctor, right, I was like, oh, I'm going to fix everybody's thing. I'm going to take them all on. I'm going to fix everybody up, right? By lunchtime, I was overwhelmed because everybody comes in with a problem going, doc, this, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to, right? So I had to learn early on, like, look, 2 things. One, their problems are their problems, not my problem. I'm here to help them with their problems. So their problems aren't a 0 to me, but they max out at a 5. And the second is that I can't fix anything with them. Like all I can do is point them in the right direction, give them the best advice I can give them. But they have to live their life. So if you take those 2 things, then all of a sudden you're not so stressed out. So what I talk about are the 2 things I talk about are, one, a leaky sponge. So here you are, a sponge, and you're soaking in everybody else's stresses to the point where you get oversaturated and now you're leaking. You're like, I'm leaking, right? And it's like, so then somebody comes along and says, oh, doc, I got this problem. Like, all right. And you're like, oh, I'm leaking some more. Right? So the way to not leak is like, okay, your problems are a 5, not a 0. They're a 5. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to do the best I can to help you, but it's a 5, right? Now, what I do is go, okay, maybe I can learn better advice. Maybe I read a book and that gives me, maybe I go read an article in a newspaper. I go to a conference and I learn something. So now you got an autoimmune disease and I can do something more about it because I know, oh, this is because da 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 da, right? Or I can get better at convincing you to do it. So you go, Dr. Sprouse, my joints are killing me. I'm like, well, you're 300 pounds overweight. Maybe if you lost some weight, yeah, whatever. Maybe I'll get better at convincing you should try to do that, right? So those are the things I can do, but I can't make you lose 300 pounds. So my success is not predicated on you losing 300 pounds. My success is predicated on giving you the best advice I can with the most persuasive techniques I can use. That's when I'm doing good, right? So if you do that and you keep their stress as a 5 and and you max yours out as a 10, half your stress goes away. And as I said, I was watching my wife. Like my stepson was struggling down in Georgia, and she's not sleeping, she's not eating, she's freaking out. And I'm like, honey, these aren't your stresses, right? These are his stresses. So we can help, but they're his. He's got to figure that out. And we gave him all this advice, which of course he wasn't like. One day he's telling me how he hates his job. And I'm like, okay, well, go to work today and think all the good things that happen because of your job. You make money, you meet some nice people, blah, 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 right? He came home and he was miserable. I'm like, what happened? He goes, yeah, I didn't do a single thing you said. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, and I was miserable and I didn't get any tips. He works as a bartender. He goes, because I was miserable, nobody gave me a tip. I'm like, right? So it's like, yeah. So you can't make people get better. You can only point them in the right direction. And so then you take on their success or failure as your success or failure, you're going to get in trouble. So I use this thing called an empathy wall. So the empathy wall has to be thick enough that protects you against other people's stresses, but thin enough that you can still participate and be empathetic to them and go, oh, yeah, oh, I feel you. So I learned really early on, like if somebody came in and said, Doc, I lost my spouse, I couldn't fall apart and start crying and go, oh, right. That the wall had to be thick enough I could protect myself, but it had to be thin enough that I could say, yeah, I get it. That would be a sad thing. I know how you feel because I just lost my whatever, right? And so, yeah, so now you can be empathetic, but yet not get destroyed by other people's stresses.
That's so useful. And it's just like a testament to how important boundaries are because it's like a form of a boundary.
Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is. Yes, definitely. Because and again, I think this is women's strength is their boundaries are kind of loose, right? And I think it has to do with maternal kid thing, right? So their boundaries are a little bit loose, so they get into more trouble with this, not having that empathy wall. They get into a lot more trouble than men do because men kind of compartmentalize like, this is it, this is me, that's you, right? So yeah, no, I think that's a big deal.
There's also this beautiful concept I learned about in 12 step that when someone that you love is like going through something, you have to give them the dignity to fall on their own face. And so that's like a helpful way to think about it. If someone's in trouble, you give them advice, you give as much as you can of yourself, but you still give them their dignity to, as you said, live their own life and figure their own problems out.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I'd use I'm not sure I would use that word dignity, right? I hear what you're saying. I mean, it makes sense. What I would say is and I've read something about, I mean, the word that's coming to my mind is infantile, infantilism. I don't know. I'm going to come up with a different word, right? You're not giving them you're basically saying you're not equipped to handle this problem, so I'm going to handle it for you. And you're like, well, that's kind of demeaning in a way, right? Because you're like, you're not smart enough, strong enough, whatever, resourceful enough. So we're going to have to step in. No. So like, okay, we're going to show you the direction, but let you do it on your own. And if it doesn't go well, we'll be there to support you and help you. But yeah, you got to do this on your own, which then becomes an achievement for them, and that helps bolster their self-esteem. So yeah, I'm not sure I'd use the word dignity, but maybe after I say it out loud, maybe you're on the right track. So
talk to me about what you've dubbed as the happy place.
Wow, that's a fun place to talk about, right? How many people have you heard gone, oh, when I retire, life's going to be great. This weekend, we're going to have so much fun, right? Oh, and I go on vacation, blah, blah, blah. So their happy place is very time dependent. Like it's only for the weekend. It's only when they're on vacation. It's not until I retire, right? I'm like, no, I want people to have their happy place like right now. They can pull it out of their pocket when they're yelling at their kid for coming in late or whatever, right? They have their happy place right with them all the time. And so I started down because I would say to people like, if you weren't so stressed out, where would you be? And they're like, I don't know, doc, I know where I don't want to be. I just don't have any idea where I do want to be. And I'm like, oh, well, then we need to find a place, because if you don't know where you want to be, you're not going to get there. Right. So when I started writing out about happy places, I'm like, wait, like, I tell a story because my wife, like, I love the beach, right? I like the sand and the waves and riding the waves and the suntan lotion, blah, 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 right? My wife hates the beach. She calls it a big kitty litter box. And I'm like, right. So our happy places are very different. And I'm like, well, how's that going to work? Right. So here's what I realized, that even though our happy places are very different, the rooms of our happy place are the same. So they get decorated differently. Like she has different furniture and different wall colors and blah, blah, blah. But the rooms are all the same. So then you have to identify what are the rooms of people's happy places, because it's actually universal. If you're human, this is your happy place, right? So here's the rooms. So the first one I talk about is gratitude. And when you feel grateful for what you got going on, what? It's hard to be upset, right? Two is then having pleasure in your life or love in your life, because we all want some of that, right? And the third is then anticipating some of that. So if I say I'm going to go on vacation, that gives me weeks and months to go, oh, that's going to be so much fun, right? That makes me feel good right now, right? And then the fourth is what I call fulfillment. And fulfillment is really critical to humans, because it used to be for a human that just waking up in the morning jazzed you up, because that was a big deal to stay alive, right? But now that's too easy. That doesn't give us any excitement anymore. We have to find something else that gives us excitement. For me personally, it was easier. Like being a doctor has been great, trying to make people healthier and happier. And then I stopped being a doctor, but now I'm an author and I'm doing the same thing, right? So my purpose in life hasn't changed at all. The tools that I use to get there changed, but it's the same purpose. And then the other parts of fulfillment are curiosity and giving / sharing. And what you find is when people are learning something new, it's really kind of fun, right? Like our brains have been set up to be curious and learn something new. And we've also been set up in a group atmosphere. So we like sharing and giving because we want it back too, right? So it's like when you're in a group, you like that idea of sharing and giving. And then contentment comes from sort of adding all that stuff up together. And you have a sense of contentment in your life. And then the last piece I talk about is cash. And I like, yeah, not cash, money cash, but like cash stands for, it's an acronym. So it stands for feeling connected and feeling in some control. And then feeling accepted and having appreciation. And then feeling safe and feeling have some spirituality to you. And then the H stands for feeling having hope. And the last one is humor, right? So I like humor because humor is that tool that we use to make things that are horrible not so horrible. And I worry about our society nowadays is because we've gotten so, I don't know, what's the word I want to use? I don't know. Humor is
PC.
kind of, yeah, it's difficult because like you're trying to make fun of something and people are giving you a hard time. You're like, no, I'm just trying to make fun of this. So it won't be so stressful. But people aren't getting that. They're not very tolerant of it anymore. So it would be, your job is hard to be a comedian right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of like walking on eggshells.
Yes, exactly, right. And and I'm going to guess there's always going to be a couple of people in the audience that take offense to what you're saying, as opposed to seeing the humor of it. So,
Yeah, it's just if you're gonna do this and be a comedian, yeah, if no one's mad at you, that means no one's hearing you.
well, that's a good way to put it. I like it, right? Anyway, but if you put all those rooms together, what a freaking nice place that is. And it's in your pocket. You can pull it out whenever you want. And if everybody's trying to get in their happy place, that means we're all working together. We all want to feel connected. We all want to be accepted, blah, 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 right? So then everybody, the more I'm in my happy place, the more you're in your happy place.
Beautifully put. And being in every room means you're happy, huh?
Yes, right. Here's what I say. Put a big beaming smile on your face. Yay, right.
Incredible. Well, Dr. Sprouse, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, they want to get a hold of your book, where should they go?
Right. So I have this website. It's thelessstressdoc.com, right? And on that website, it has a chapter of the book that you can download for free. There's a course that kind of goes along with the book, and it's put out in like 15 little minute segments so that you can just listen to it while you're driving or if you're cooking or whatever. And then there's QR codes to the books, but the books are also on Amazon, and they're on. So there's two books I wrote. One is called Highway to Your Happy Place: A Roadmap to Less Stress. That's the book I wrote myself. And then there's another book I got involved with called Mindset Matters, and that's a book I co-authored with Jack Canfield and some other authors, and we all kind of contributed our story to it. Because to me, mindset really matters. It really makes a difference. So they're both on Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and there's an audio book for them, and there's an ebook for both of them. But here's what I found as an author: like you have to write kind of generically because I don't know who's on the other side of the book. Like it could be a young female, it could be an old guy, it could be red. I don't know. So the book has to get written sort of generically. But if you want some individual help, I have an email, lessstressdoc@gmail.com, that you can just email and say, hey, I need some help. Because I find that if I'm talking to you, I can personalize what's in the book to you. And I think that becomes more effective.
Incredible. Well, I love your work and I so appreciate you talking to me today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. And I'm hoping that we made our goal of helping somebody today get better.
I think we did. And if nothing else, this helped me tremendously.
Cool. Excellent.
Well, thank you for doing the show. And
All
thank
right.
you so much for everybody for listening. Bye.